One of the first things you need to decide upon before you go through all of this effort, though, is whether or not being part of a mastermind group is actually right for you. For some people, it just won't work. They won't be willing to open up and admit and discuss their problems, or maybe they don't have enough experience to really contribute and add value to the other members of the group. Fundamentally, it comes down to a few simple things. Firstly, are you in a position where you really want to grow? You have ambition, passion for property investing, but sometimes you just feel alone and don't know where to turn for advice? Secondly, do you find yourself trying to cover all the bases and do everything on your own? This could mean you're a bit of a control freak, but if you look forward to the days when you can grow your team, delegate and outsource, but you just don't have the time or know how to take the next steps, then a mastermind group could help you so much. Finally, if you find that you're surrounded by negative people, or even simply just people who don't share your same desire to improve yourself and your future, this Jim Rohn quote is one of my favorites, and it's absolutely true. You're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I don't think the number is so important there. It could be the 4 people or the 20 people, but the people that you surround yourself with on a daily basis really do rub off on you. If you're desperate to discuss ideas, strategies, and goals with other people who will inspire you, encourage you, and push you forward, then a mastermind group can be one of the best ways to find these people. Okay, I've definitely given you enough information now about all of the positives of mastermind groups, how they can help you transform your business, and you're still with me, which is great. The first thing to decide on now is how many people you want to have in your group, and you've got a couple of options here. Small mastermind groups are where I started out, and if you're going to start your own, they're where I suggest you get started as well. Relationships can be developed so quickly when you only have a few people in your group, so you can get down to business so much quicker. They're also really easy to set up and manage, as you won't have loads of conflicting schedules or too many people to get through in each session either. On the downside, you can sometimes find there's a lack of breadth of knowledge in the group, and you don't always get the specific help that you need. Equally, because there are only a small number of people in the group, if 1 or 2 lose interest or happen to be on holiday at the same time or just busy with work, the group all of a sudden can be too small to be effective, and they can quickly fall apart at that stage. These are minor issues though, and if you're just starting out, this is genuinely a great place to start. Larger groups do exist, and some of these work well, but more often than not, they're just not as effective or productive for the members as a more intimate group. When I'm talking about bigger groups, I'm meaning those with 50 to 100 people, but I've heard of some, as you can see here, with as many as 500 people, which is just massive. Real deep connections are so hard to make in groups of this size, and because there are so many people, it's almost impossible to hold each other accountable, which is one of the main benefits of being in a mastermind group. With the groups that I run, I've found what I think is the real sweet spot in terms of numbers. I've got a few years of experience running these groups, so I'm happy to keep everyone in check and make sure that everything runs to schedule. But you get some really interesting advantages in a group of around 15 to 20 people compared to a smaller group of only 5 or 6. The amount of experience in the group grows dramatically, so virtually every problem you might face, there's going to be someone, if not multiple people, who have been through it before and can give you the guidance you need to successfully come out the other side. The other major advantage of a group this size is it becomes an almost 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hub of activity. There are always discussions going on, people sharing ideas and figuring out ways to grow their business and their profits. There are none of the same risks with a smaller group if a few people are absent for a couple of weeks, but it's still small enough that you get to know everybody really well. Whilst I find this group size of around 15 to 20 people absolutely ideal, I still think if you're going to run your own mastermind group for the first time, starting with a smaller number is probably going to be better and probably going to be a little easier for you. Once you've figured out how many people you want to have in the group, you also need to make sure that you get the right people. Actually, this is probably even more important than aiming for a specific number, as One or two more or less than you want shouldn't make a huge difference, but get the wrong people in your group and it could be a disaster from day one. There was this great saying I kept hearing when I was in Thailand a few years ago. Same but different. And I looked into it because everyone was saying it all around me. And some of the connotations are a little lowbrow, but as you can probably figure out, it basically means that something is similar but not quite the same. A bit like a fake Rolex watch in a backstreet market. I like that phrase when thinking about the mix of people to have in a mastermind group. You could all be in the same industry, in this case obviously property investing, but be focusing on different strategies. Or similarly, you could be in completely different industries but all share an interest in something like online marketing, for example. Sticking with the property theme though, you might want to pull together a group of people who are working on the same strategy as you but are in different geographic locations, which was kind of like my letting agency mastermind, where our businesses were all very similar. We were all trying to do the same things, but we were spread out enough geographically to not be competing for the same customers, which was great. It's always good to have one thing in common so that you're speaking the same language, but diversity in what you're doing or how you're doing it will bring fresh perspectives and ideas to your problems and potential solutions. Whichever similarities and differences you decide to focus on, the one thing you want to really fight for is making sure you have the absolute strongest possible people in your group. You never want to be the smartest person in the room, and the more highly successful and highly ambitious people you can surround yourself with, the quicker your own business is going to take off. And that's one of the great things about starting your own group. You're in control, and it almost gives you permission to have the least experience. Your value comes from bringing the people together and facilitating the mastermind groups, and you get to seek knowledge from some really amazing people. There are a few watchouts I've experienced when it comes to diversity, a couple of areas where it just doesn't work so well. Whilst I've made it clear that a mix of perspectives and experiences is what makes a great mastermind group, you do sometimes need to be careful with these. A wide mix of ages can make some interactions difficult. This is one of the things that I've come across. It's obviously a bit of a generalization, but younger generations tend to shoot from the hip and be a bit more proactive and vocal, whilst the older generations are more considered in what they're going to say. And unless your older members are equally very vocal, they can often be overrun by the younger people in the group, and you miss out on their years of valuable experience. Geography can be a difficult one for a few reasons as well. From a face-to-face meeting perspective, even small distances can make it difficult for a group to get together regularly. Things like traffic or weather, or even changes in someone's schedule, and all of a sudden half of your group can't turn up. Even with online or virtual meetings though, bringing together investors from different countries can result in poor advice when the legal systems and local customs can vary wildly. And this is definitely the case in property investing. I'm not just talking about big distances either. It's not like bringing together a group from the UK and a group from the US, but even within the UK, the rules for HMOs, for example, are completely different between Scotland and England, which can turn well-intentioned guidance into a real danger if you don't know these differences exist. My advice and how I run my groups is not to worry too much about the strategies that people are focusing on, as we all still need to raise finance and hire staff and source deals and so on, but worry more about bringing together a group who have a similar ambition and similar energy levels. That's the key thing that I think holds a lot of people together. If you've got too many people that have got completely diverse ambitions, maybe one of them only wants to bring in an extra £1,000 a month, and you've got a couple of people that want to be bringing in 20 grand a month. One of them wants to do it in 6 months and one of them's happy to do it in 5 years, then that's a bit of an imbalance, and that's what I would focus on getting right. The next step is to hunt down this dream team that you've started to create in your head. Now, you might already have an idea of who you'd like to work with based on your immediate network, people you've worked with in the past, or even just people that you've met on your travels through the property world. The advantage of doing it this way is that relationships will form quicker than they would with complete strangers, as some of the hard work has already been done. If you know these people enough to reach out to them and ask them, obviously you've got a little bit of a relationship there already. If you've exhausted your personal network though before you fill your group, there are plenty of other options of places to find great potential mastermind members. Social media is obviously a great place to start, as you can almost weigh people up before committing to anything. You've probably got a few dozen or even hundreds of Facebook friends in the property world who you've never actually met before, but you know a little bit about them and what they're up to through their updates and comments in some of the property groups. I actually find a lot of my podcast guests through a bit of casual Facebook stalking, not to sound too creepy. And as I mentioned earlier, a good few of them were some of my earliest property investment mastermind group members. There's absolutely no reason that you can't find people for your group in this same way. Looking at who you think is doing great things, operates with the same ethics as yourself, and is always happy to offer advice. Once you've explained to them that you want to help them grow their business, it's usually pretty easy to get from there to getting them to agree to join. Local property networking events are another great place to meet potential group members. You're basically in a room full of 50 or more people who all have taken time out of their evenings and their schedules to expand their property knowledge. Everyone goes to these events for a reason, and whether it's as simple as to network with other investors or because they want to learn about a specific topic like deal sourcing or limited company mortgages, they're all seeking something that can be achieved through joining your mastermind group. In a very similar way to these networking events, training courses and seminars are another great place to find people. In fact, these are probably even better, as you've all just sat through the same course content, you're probably working on similar strategies and facing the same difficulties. But we all know that converting that knowledge into action can be so difficult when we get back to the real world. It's little surprise that something like 80% of course attendees never do anything with the information that they're given. Wouldn't it be absolutely ideal to create a mastermind group with your fellow course attendees and help each other to actually implement what you've just spent your time and money learning? I genuinely cannot think of a better place to get started finding members for your mastermind group than at a recent training event. Once you start to get a few people on board, it actually gets a little bit easier and the momentum builds up, and you can ask the founding members to go through the same channels as we've just gone through. Who is in their network, who do they admire on social media, and what trainings have they been on recently? By asking these founding members to suggest people, they feel more involved in the group, and having a few people who already know each other can help boost how quickly relationships are formed and how quickly people begin to open up. Unfortunately though, not everybody you ask will agree to join. Some simply won't have the time and can't see the value that they'll get from it, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions and their own ways of doing business, but there are a few things you can do to sell it to the right people, and I use the word sell very loosely here. This is supposed to be an environment that's a win-win for all members of the group. If you find yourself giving someone the hard sell to join, unless they're hugely experienced and you know they'll bring amazing value to the group, they probably won't appreciate it enough, and you should look for someone else to fill their slot. You shouldn't need to sell this to anyone. The first hurdle I've had to face is getting past some of the misconceptions about mastermind groups. The truth of it is, a lot of people don't know what a real mastermind group is, and more still have negative connotations based on the term being used incorrectly. We've got a page on our website which you might have come across when you found this webinar, which runs through what a mastermind group is and, just as importantly, what it isn't. And we've covered a lot of that in this webinar, but it's well worth familiarizing yourself with this again so that you can have an informed conversation with your prospective members about what to expect and exactly what they'll get from being a member. You can find all of this information at insidepropertyinvesting.com/mastermind, and it's going to be a great reference point for you to go back to. One other thing you need to do is consider your own value as well. If you're going to go to all of the effort of creating and running a mastermind group, you want to make sure that you're getting as much value as everyone else. There's no point creating a group with people just starting out if you've already been investing for a number of years. You simply won't get the advice you need to take your business forward. And similarly, whilst it might make you feel special to be in a group with some of the biggest developers in the UK, if you're trying to figure out how to buy your first single let, they won't be able to give you the best guidance that you need. I did say earlier that you want to surround yourself with the best possible people, but they still need to be at a similar starting point as you. It's the people with the most ambition and determination that will make the best group. Finally, you want to be really selective. Filling your first group can be tough and take some time, but you'll really regret letting just anyone in order to get you started. You're much better served in the long run if you take a few extra weeks or months up front to find the right people for your group. And whilst you're waiting to find these dream team members to fill the last seats, there's nothing to stop you and the other founding members getting to know each other and each other's businesses. The more you understand and can relate to the people in your group when you actually do get started, the more progress you can make in your hot seat sessions. Hopefully that's enough information to help you get started thinking about the size of group that you want to run, the type of people you want to join your group, and how you're going to start finding them. If you really push it, you could feasibly have your first group together in just a few weeks. Now, I need to run you through exactly what a mastermind meeting is like, and I'm going to cover the frequency of meetings, a great agenda to start your meetings with, the different roles you need to fill in order to run a successful meeting, and some of the different options around where and how to host them. Let's start with how frequently you should be running your meetings. And there are a few things to consider here, depending on what stage of your investing journey you're at, and even what strategy you're focusing on. The first thing to keep in mind is that property is often a slow-moving game. If you're flipping houses and only have enough funds for one deal at a time, you could be pretty quiet for 3 or 4 months at a time when you're waiting for a house to sell or waiting to complete on your next one. I wouldn't necessarily let this put you off joining a group, as a lot of the problems that we face can arise during some of these quieter times. You might need to figure out your options for raising money quickly if your cash is tied up but your dream project comes on the market. Or you might face problems from a buyer's solicitor that you need advice on how to overcome. It might be worth looking at slightly less frequent meetings in this case, but personally I believe you've always got time to be learning. At the other end of things, if you're working on multiple deals at any one time or have a shorter cycle in industries like rent to rent, you'll probably have questions and challenges arising on an almost daily basis, so really frequent meetings can work wonders here. The frequency also depends on whether you decide to have your meetings face-to-face or online. Face-to-face meetings have some advantages which I'll cover shortly, but they're also a lot more time consuming and can be more difficult to attend, so your group might be limited to once a month or even less. Online meetings have the advantage that you can set them up instantly and there's zero travel time, so more frequent meetings are much easier to attend. The final consideration when it comes to frequency is how many members you have. Larger groups typically need to meet more frequently, simply to give everyone a chance to share all of their problems. If you only have a meeting every 2 months and you run out of time, someone could have a burning question that they then need to wait another 2 months before they get an answer to it, by which point it could well be too late for that advice to be relevant. I find personally that weekly or fortnightly meetings work best in most situations. If you try to run them any less frequently than this, the relationships just don't develop as you're not spending enough time together, and they're not timely enough to make sure people get the advice they need when they need it. The agenda for your meetings is obviously a big consideration as well. This is what gives you the opportunity to really get behind the scenes of your members' businesses and help them to move in the right direction. This is a pretty basic agenda format, and it can be tweaked in many ways as your group evolves, but it's the exact same format that I use to host my meetings, and I find it works perfectly. We always start off with each member sharing our big win since the last meeting. This isn't an invitation to give us a full run through of everything that you've been up to, but it makes you really focus on what single achievement has had the biggest positive impact on your business. We often forget to reflect on our successes, so this is a great opportunity to think back over all the good things that we've done and figure out what tasks are making the most difference to our success. Sharing them publicly at the start of the meeting helps to get everyone excited and motivated for the upcoming session, and it makes it clear if anyone in the group is really struggling and needs a bit of extra support. I track all of these big wins, and it gives us a moving record of everything the group has achieved, so that when we look back every few months, we can assess just how far we've all come together. Then we move into the main event, the hot seat sessions. This is where the group members get a chance to share whatever problem or challenge they want help with, and get advice and guidance from the other group members. Now, you can either give a few members a short session, or give just one or two members a longer session, and it's entirely up to you which way you go with it. But I've found in our business around 20 minutes for an individual session is ideal. It allows us to get through 5 or 6 people in a 2-hour meeting, so lots of people are getting the advice that they need every week. If the sessions are any less than this, it's difficult to get to the core of the issue, and whilst longer sessions can be valuable, we tend to save these for our face-to-face weekends so that people aren't waiting for too long to get advice that they need on a regular basis. A good hot seat session starts with preparation from the person in the hot seat. If they come to the meeting prepared, it's much easier to start helping them quicker. They need to take us to the core of the issue that they're facing, which normally takes the first 3 to 5 minutes. During this time, they talk and everyone else is quiet. Once they've explained the situation as best they can, we tend to spend a few more minutes asking questions and seeking information to better understand anything that they've missed out or that we feel is important to give a relevant answer. To give a really simple example of this, someone might be asking what strategy that they should be focusing on. Now, in order to answer this well, we'd obviously need to ask more questions around what their goals are, how much time they've got to spend on it, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and things like that. Once everyone is on the same page with regards to what the problem is and the hot seat participants' own individual circumstances, then the brainstorming begins. Now, you might find it's a simple question about a tax issue that someone in the group has gone through before, and in that case, it can be tied up extremely quickly. We can give them clear next steps, and the hot seat participant knows exactly what they need to follow. It might be more of a discussion though, whereby we all share our opinions and debate the best route forward as a group, and give the participant a few options to consider before deciding which path to take. Once we've completed the hot seat sessions, we always finish up the meeting with a bit of accountability, and this is one of the real key values that I get from our sessions. I make sure that everyone gives me their one thing which they're going to achieve before the next call, and it needs to be specific. I want them to commit publicly to something tangible and something that's achievable in the space of a week or two. I obviously track all of these one things as well, and it's great fun making people sweat a little when I post in our Facebook group a few days before the next meeting. If they've not made enough progress yet so that they can join the next meeting and proudly say that they've accomplished their one thing, they know they've got a couple of days of real hustle ahead of them to make sure that it gets done on time. I've followed this exact format for years now, and despite its simplicity, it has exactly the right balance of personal reflection, accountability, and support that makes Mastermind meetings great. Within the meetings, it can be helpful to have a few different rules defined to make sure that the meetings run smoothly. It's nothing complicated, as you can see here, and most of it can be done by one person, but whether you do it all or ask for help, at least you'll know what tasks need to be done in order to host a great meeting. The first and most important role is the facilitator. This is likely the person who created the group, and they're the one who takes care of all of the logistics outside of the calls, setting the schedule, arranging the meeting rooms, and so on. And within the actual meetings, they'll be the one to guide the discussions and keep everything on track. Then you've got the assistant role, which could well be done by the same person if it's a smaller group, but it can help for this to be done by someone else so that the facilitator is engaged in the conversation rather than watching the clock all the time. The assistant can help out by taking notes of the big wins, the hot seat discussions, and everyone's one thing goals for the next session. They can also help keep track of the timings so that the meetings don't start to overrun. We all know how much property people love to talk when we get started. If you do choose to get help with this assistant stuff, it can be done on a rotational basis if you want to do it that way, so that everyone in the group takes a turn helping out rather than one person being stuck with it every week. Then you've got the hot seat participants, and they need to do their bit as well to ensure that they get the most from their hot seat sessions. The more preparation they do on their issue, the quicker the rest of the group can understand the core of what they're struggling with and get to giving them the best advice. Spending 10 minutes of your session trying to figure out yourself what you're struggling with isn't helpful to anyone. That's why this preparation in advance is so important. The final role is that of the members. Now, this is basically everyone who isn't in the hot seat at that time. These groups are all about achieving results using the combined knowledge of the members. So everyone needs to show up and shut up when they're not talking. It's very easy to try and multitask in environments like this and not give it your full attention. So I like to get all members to commit to switching off any distractions before we start. If they can't do that for 1 or 2 hours when someone else needs their help, then why should we all make the effort when they need their help? That's the philosophy I take, and everyone in the group seemed to agree with me. Now, the other thing I encourage all members to do is to put themselves in the hot seat participant's shoes. I really like this change to the golden rule, and I'm not religious at all, so this isn't some it's obviously a reference to the Bible, but not in that sense. Rather than do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I prefer to switch it a little bit and say do unto others as they would want done unto them. Basically, instead of saying to treat others the way you'd want them to treat you, it says treat others the way that they would like to be treated themselves. If someone is asking for advice or a solution to a problem, you need to consider their own individual situation. If you give the advice that you'd like to hear, but you've got different goals or in a different stage with your property investing, your advice might not be what they need to hear. Instead, you should factor in what their goals are and their current situation is in order to give the most relevant advice. This is so important, but the good thing is that after a group have known each other for a few months, it almost becomes second nature as we start to have a deeper understanding of each other's businesses and each other's motivations. One of the big questions I always get is around whether mastermind meetings should be hosted in person or virtually. My personal preference is for virtual meetings, but let's take a look at both because you might find that face-to-face is better for you. Starting with the face-to-face meetings, the obvious advantage is that you will almost certainly develop more trust and build deeper personal relationships quicker when you're in the same room as someone than if you're just looking at them through a webcam. That is by far and away the biggest advantage, and there's no overcoming that really with online meetings. On the downside though, they do limit you to people within a relatively small geographic area. They can take more time as you have to factor in the time to travel to and from wherever you decide to meet, and they often result in additional expenses for things like venue hire, food and drinks, transport costs, and so on. And you won't necessarily be picking up the tab for all of this, but even a coffee is going to be more expensive in a venue than making it at home before you sit down in front of your laptop. The online argument is that they are ridiculously easy to set up with just an ounce of technical knowledge. Your members can come from anywhere you like, and even with UK property investing, I often find myself working with people who are either on holiday for a month or two or living elsewhere but investing in the UK, so you can involve these people in online meetings, which is great. The running costs are virtually zero unless you opt for some fancy software to host your meetings. But the point is that they can be free, and in most cases they will be. The idea of having to travel is completely removed from the equation as well when you host an online meeting, which reduces the time commitment that people need to make, and it also opens up possibilities for early morning sessions and late evening sessions when it might otherwise be difficult to leave the house. One of the biggest advantages for me is that you can record the entire thing for people to watch back later as well. It's great for people who either can't attend a specific meeting and want to catch up, or for people who have had hot seat sessions during that call and it allows them to be completely present in the conversation during their session without having to worry about taking notes. Then when the call is finished, they can go back and watch their session again and really digest all of the advice that they were given. The one downside here is obviously the flip of the face-to-face advantage. There is simply no getting around the fact that virtual meetings do take longer for people to build those relationships and feel like they have a strong connection with the rest of the group. The options you have for hosting venues or locations are pretty diverse as well. You should never be short of somewhere convenient to meet. For face-to-face meetings, although you can probably tell already that my preference and recommendation is to go down the online route, you can have them at your office, which is a nice way to see how other people work, or coffee shops, although these can lack privacy. You can meet at each other's homes once you're a bit more comfortable with each other. There is a growing number of co-working and hot desk spaces that offer meeting rooms that you can hire for short periods of time. Bars are an option for less formal meetings, and so on. You get the point that if there's a roof with a building with a roof, you know what I mean, you can probably meet there. Online, the options are as varied, although I've just listed 3 of my favorite ones here. You shouldn't need any more than what I've mentioned on this slide. Skype is great for really simple meetings. It's free to use, although if you use them too often, they can kick you off and insist that you move to a business plan. They do monitor that, so that's just a watch out. But they allow everyone to get on a video call really quickly and really easily. Google Hangouts is another great option. Again, it's free and has some added benefits like more screen sharing and co-working features, as well as automatically recording all calls directly to your YouTube account, which is really handy. One of the downsides though is that they limit calls to 10 participants if you're on one of their free plans, and the service can be a little sketchy at times. We have known calls to drop midway through, and that's a real pain if you're in the middle of someone's session. The final recommendation I would make is a program called Zoom, which has a small monthly cost. I think it's around $14 or $15. It's a US company, so they always bill in dollars, but it's not a lot of money. But it's so reliable and easy to use, and there are some great features included. You can have up to 50 people on a call, which is great for my larger groups. It records the video and audio separately, so I can release the calls both on our private YouTube channel and as a private podcast if people prefer to listen back to them whilst they're on the go. This at the bottom is a pretty tiny screenshot you can see, and I've blurred all the faces to protect the members of the group, but you can see all of our videos, our webcams are next to each other on a single screen, and genuinely it really is almost as good as being in the same room as these people. Now, that's obviously quite a lot of information to take in, both on the membership side of things and actually running the meetings. So to help you visualize what my groups look like, let me just run through that quickly. In terms of numbers, I have got 15 to 20 really ambitious property investors in my main group. The number goes up and down slightly as people come and go, but I said earlier, I find this number has some real advantages over the smaller groups once you get over the logistical issues. There's so much experience in these groups and people working on virtually every strategy that you can imagine. It is amazing to see the conversations, the ideas, and the advice that's being shared here. We have 4 calls per month, so normally that's 1 every week, except for about 4 weeks a year when we take a week off. This means that the members can get the advice they need as soon as they need it, rather than having to wait a month till the next call. We split the schedule so that 2 of the calls every month are during office hours and 2 are in the evenings. Some of our members still have full-time jobs as well as investing on the side. Others have got family commitments, and with everything else that we've all got going on, this mix of schedules, having 2 during the day and 2 in the evenings, seems to work really well. Each call lasts for around about 2 hours or a little more depending on how excited we all get. But this gives us time to get through 5 or 6 20-minute hot seat sessions per call, giving each person a good chance to share what they're working on and get some real advice without running out of time. Finally, we use Zoom video conferencing like I mentioned. It's got a small cost associated with it, but it really helps me to facilitate this size of group, and we back it all up so that the recordings are there for everyone to go back and watch if they want to. Whilst I said earlier that small groups are easier to set up and manage, this is a pretty good blueprint that you can copy and tweak to suit your own mastermind group.